struggling single mom texts the billionaire Alpha by mistake, asking for money to buy baby formula. The village of Lyrath lay beneath a sky that never fully brightened. Twilight clung to the rooftops and the cobblestone streets, a persistent half-light that seemed to blur the line between day and night. Shadows stretched long and whispering, curling along the edges of every alley, hiding secrets that no villager dared uncover. Among them lived Alara, a young mother with hair like midnight and eyes that carried both fatigue and hope. Her small home, built of rough stone and timber, smelled faintly of herbs and the faint smoke of her fire. She sat by the cradle, gently rocking her infant son, Kale, humming a soft tune she had learned from her own mother. Each day had grown harder. Ever since her husband had been taken by the plague that haunted the region, she had been left to care for Kale alone. Her strength was waning. Her magic, subtle but real, had dimmed in grief. And the curse that lingered in her family's blood, a shadowy inheritance she could never escape, clung closer with every sleepless night. Tonight the chill in the air was sharper than usual, and her pantry nearly bare. Kale stirred, his tiny face scrunching in hunger. Ilara's hands trembled as she searched through her cupboards. Nothing remained but dry crumbs and a few dried roots she knew could only give the boy a faint warmth. Desperation pressed against her chest like the weight of the sky itself. In a trembling moment she remembered the message charms her friend had once sent her. A small, enchanted stone that could deliver a written plea across any distance. She had never used it herself. The magic had always seemed too dangerous, too personal. But Kale's hungry cries cut through her hesitation. Ilara whispered a prayer, then etched the words into the charm. "Please, anyone. My son is starving. I need life essence to nourish him. I have nowhere else to turn. Help me, please." She pressed the charm and it glimmered with a pale blue light. In that instant, she did not know whom she had reached. She did not know that the pulse of magic would travel farther than intended, crossing walls, rivers, and forests into the heart of the Alpha Lord's fortress. The message reached Kael'ren as he stood in the highest tower of his palace, watching the eternal twilight from his balcony. He was a man of imposing presence, broad-shouldered, tall, with hair like silver threads falling around a face both handsome and severe. His eyes, a piercing shade of amber, could see through walls, through lies, through the very essence of a person. And tonight, they glimmered with sudden interest. A soft hum filled the air around him, a resonance only those attuned to the deepest currents of magic could perceive. He lifted his hand and felt the pulse of the charm's energy. Curious, he traced its origin, following the magical thread until it led him to a small, humble home on the outskirts of the village. Kael'ren did not knock. The doors opened silently at his approach, as if the house itself recognized the authority of the Alpha. He stepped inside, a shadow moving among shadows, and saw her, Ilara, pale and weary, holding her son close. Kael, sensing the presence of the stranger, reached for him instinctively, his small hands brushing Kael'ren's cloak. Ilara gasped. She had never seen anyone like him. His aura was overwhelming, dangerous, magnetic, and utterly foreign. Fear prickled her skin, yet she could not look away. You summoned me." Kael'ren's voice was low, almost a growl, but there was curiosity beneath the sharpness. He knelt slightly, enough to meet her eyes without seeming threatening, though every movement carried power. I didn't know it would reach you," she stammered. Her words felt weak against the weight of his presence. I needed help for my son. Please." Her voice cracked as she glanced at Kael, who was now looking between them with innocent eyes. Kael'ren studied her. She was not like the others who sought favors or power from him. There was no pretense in her gaze, no hidden agenda, only raw, desperate need, and something else, something fragile, yet bright, like a candle fighting against the wind. He extended his hand, not touching her, but the gesture carried unspoken meaning. "You have called me," he said. "You know what it costs to draw the attention of the Alpha." Ilara swallowed hard, realizing that help might demand more than she had imagined, but Kael's hunger pressed against her heart. I will do anything." Please. Anything. Kaelren's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. Anything is a dangerous word. He reached into the folds of his cloak and produced a small vial filled with golden liquid, the life essence he had kept for emergencies in his fortress. He handed it to her, and she felt the warmth of its power. It pulsed with light, gentle yet potent, promising nourishment, protection, and danger. Elara's hand shook as she took the vial. "I thank you," she whispered. Kaelren's gaze softened for a moment, just enough for a flicker of humanity to shine through. But then he stood, towering again, a reminder that he was no ordinary man. "Do not mistake my generosity for kindness," he warned. "Everything has a cost. You have drawn my attention. That cannot be undone." Elara's heart thudded in her chest. She felt both relief and a deep, inexplicable fear. She had called for help, but in doing so, she had summoned a force she could neither resist nor fully understand. Over the next days, Kaelren did not leave her thoughts. She saw him in fleeting moments, always watching from the shadows, always near, but never fully present. Sometimes she imagined his amber eyes in the night piercing through the darkness, searching for her. She hated the fear it stirred, but she could not deny the pull. Meanwhile, whispers traveled through the village. The Alpha had appeared. Some said he sought a traitor, others a threat to his rule. But none suspected the truth, that he had come because of her, because of the charm, because of the vulnerability that radiated from her very soul. Elara tried to resume her days, but nothing felt the same. Every step, every shadow reminded her of Kaelren's presence. She could not forget the way he had looked at her, a mixture of curiosity, power, and something deeper, something dangerous yet comforting. She felt as though she had been marked, not by fear alone, but by the promise of change. Her son, Kael, grew stronger each day, nourished by the golden life essence. But with his health returning, a new fear rose in her chest. She realized that Kaelren's intervention had bound her in ways she did not yet understand, and when she peered into the shadows at night, she sometimes saw him watching, not as a predator, but as a guardian. Then, one evening, the sky darkened more than usual, the twilight thickening into a near black velvet. The wind carried whispers, and the air vibrated with old ancient magic. Kaelren appeared in the doorway, not as a visitor, but as if he had always belonged there. His eyes glimmered with an intensity that made Elara's chest tighten. "You feel it too," he said, voice low, almost a murmur. "The curse that clings to you, it stirs, and so does something else, something older, waiting to awaken." Elara clutched her son. Fear surged through her, but so did a strange thrill. She had survived hardship, loss, and hunger. Now, standing before Kaelan, she realized that her life had crossed into something far larger than herself, a world of shadows, power, and destiny. "Why are you here?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Kaelren stepped closer, the room filling with the weight of his presence. "Because you called for me, and because, whether you know it or not, you have already touched me." Elara's breath caught. She understood then that the simple plea for life essence had changed everything. She had invited a force beyond her comprehension into her home, into her life, into her very soul. And there was no turning back. Kaelren's amber eyes met hers, searching, weighing, testing. "The world is not kind to those who ask for help," he said softly, almost gently. "And yet, you dared. That courage may save you, or it may destroy you." Elara felt her heart hammer against her ribs, equal parts fear and longing. She knew one thing with absolute certainty. The moment she sent that plea, her life and Kaelren's had become entwined. And somewhere deep within, she sensed that this was only the beginning. As Kaelren's shadow fell over her in the cradle, the wind outside carrying the faint scent of ancient storms, he whispered, "Tomorrow, you will see the price of summoning me. Tonight, rest. But remember this, Elara. You did not call for me by mistake. You called for change. And change always demands sacrifice." Her eyes widened, and her breath hitched. She held Cale tighter, feeling both the warmth of his tiny body and the cold inevitability of what was coming. Outside, the twilight deepened into near darkness, and the village of Lyrath seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the story to unfold. Elara did not know how to feel: hope, dread, excitement, fear. But she knew one truth: nothing in her life would ever be the same. And somewhere, in the silent shadows of her home, Caelrin watched, waiting, as destiny began to stir. The night stretched on, heavy and expectant, carrying whispers of magic, longing, and danger. And in the darkness, Elara realized that she had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back from the Alpha who had entered her life, nor from the power that now pulsed quietly in her veins. The storm of change had begun. The first light of dawn never fully reached Lyrath. The village sat under a blanket of soft gray twilight, but in the distance the spires of Caelrin's fortress rose like jagged teeth against the sky. The Alpha Lord's palace was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a fortress built of black stone, adorned with enchanted mirrors that reflected the past, the present, and sometimes the future. Elara's home had grown quieter since the night Caelrin had first arrived. Her son, Cale, slept soundly in his cradle, nourished by the golden life essence. Yet, the weight of what had occurred pressed heavily on her chest. She knew she had summoned a force beyond her understanding, and she could not forget the way Caelrin's amber eyes had pierced through her soul, as if he had seen everything she tried to hide. She had tried to go about her day gathering herbs and water, repairing the small wooden shutters of her home, but each shadow seemed to watch her. Every breeze through the crooked streets whispered a caution she could not name. The Alpha Lord had promised a price, and now, each moment that passed reminded her that promises from a man like Caelrin were never like words. And then, as if he had read her thoughts, Caelrin appeared. This time, he did not move like a shadow. He arrived at the door of her home as a storm of presence. The ground seemed to hum under his feet. His cloak, dark as midnight, shifted as though alive. Cale's small hands reached out instinctively, and Elara felt her pulse quicken. "I have come," Caelrin said, voice calm yet commanding. "The life essence has been delivered. The child thrives. But now, we must speak of the cost." She had expected him to leave after providing the magical nourishment, yet here he stood, unyielding, his amber eyes fixed on her as though he were weighing her very soul. "What do you want?" she asked softly, her hands trembling as they held Cale. Caelrin's expression did not soften. He knelt slightly, not in submission but to meet her gaze on a level that felt both threatening and intimate. "I will not demand your life." "Not yet. But you are aware that those who call me cannot remain untouched by my presence. You have crossed a threshold, Elara. That threshold comes with rules." Elara swallowed, a sense of dread mixed with curiosity stirring inside her. She did not know whether to fear him or the world he represented, and yet part of her, an unnameable part, felt drawn to him, to his power, to the way he seemed both a protector and a predator all at once. Caelrin continued, his voice low and deliberate. "You will come with me to my palace. There, you will live under my guidance. You will obey certain rules. This is not cruelty, but necessity. The world outside is harsh."
"Here, you will be protected, but your freedom will be limited."
The palace was distant, powerful, and surrounded by shadows she could not hope to navigate. Yet, the thought of her son's safety, of his life being secured, made her hesitate only briefly. "And if I refuse?" she asked, though a part of her already feared the answer. Caelrin's amber gaze sharpened, and a faint tension filled the room. Refusal is a choice, but consequences follow all choices. Hunger, exposure, danger from forces you cannot see.
They will find you, and I will find you.
The question is not whether I will intervene, but what you will lose before I do. Elara's breath caught. She realized that her life had already changed the moment she sent that magical plea. There was no undoing it. And though fear pressed against her, she felt the faint stirrings of courage, a strength born of desperation and love for Cale. I will come, she whispered, her voice barely audible. If it is the only way to keep him safe. Kaelin's lips curved into a faint smile, though it did not reach his eyes entirely. Wise, he said, yet wisdom is only the beginning. The palace is not merely walls and halls, it is alive. It will test you. You will learn quickly that obedience is not merely a choice but a survival skill. Fail, and the consequences are unpleasant. Elara nodded, though her heart pounded. She felt as if she were stepping into a story she had only glimpsed in dreams, one of shadows, power, and danger. The journey to Kael'ren's palace was quiet and strange. He did not speak much, and she did not try to. The path wound through forests where the trees bent toward each other, creating tunnels of shadow that seemed almost alive. Strange lights danced in the corners of her vision, and faint whispers brushed her ears. Warning, questioning, tempting. Kael, wrapped safely in her arms, slept through it all. But Elara felt a growing awareness that something about this place tested not only her body but her spirit. Kaelin walked beside her, always near, always present, yet never reaching out to guide her. His power radiated silently, a constant reminder that she was in the presence of someone whose very being shaped the world around him. At last the palace rose before them, taller and darker than she had imagined. Its walls were carved from black stone, smooth and cold and shimmering faintly as if dusted with stars. The doors opened at their approach, recognizing Kael'ren's presence and allowing passage. Inside, mirrors lined the halls, tall, narrow, and framed in silver that seemed to hum with ancient magic. In their reflections, Elara could see not only herself and her son, but fleeting images of Kael'ren's past, battles fought, and shadows endured. Kael'ren led them to a chamber that overlooked the palace gardens, though the gardens themselves were strange. Glowing flowers that thrived in the darkness, streams of silver water that flowed uphill, and shadows that moved like living things. This will be your home for now, he said. And this chamber is yours to keep. Do not mistake comfort for freedom. You will be watched, and you will be guided. Understand? Elara nodded, feeling both awe and a growing unease. The chamber was warm, protective, yet it carried an almost tangible weight. She felt the walls pressing gently against her, reminding her that she was far from the safety of her village, yet strangely safe, in a way that frightened her. Kael'ren's gaze lingered on her. You are stronger than you believe, Elara. But strength alone is not enough here. You must learn to endure, to adapt, and to trust in ways you have never known. And you must understand, your presence here is no accident. Fate has woven you into my life, and the threads are not easily untangled. Elara's heart thudded in her chest. She had expected a simple bargain, a payment for the life essence. But what Kaelin described was far more complex. Her life, her child, her very destiny were now entwined with his, bound by forces she could neither see nor fully understand. Days passed in a blur of strange lessons and silent observation. Kael'ren's attention was constant yet measured. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words carried the weight of authority, wisdom, and sometimes unexpected tenderness. Elara found herself drawn to the complexity of his presence, the man who could command armies in shadows, yet who seemed at times fragile in ways only she could sense. Kael'ren, in turn, watched her with a mixture of caution and fascination. Her courage, her maternal instinct, and the faint spark of magic within her intrigued him. He had encountered many who sought him for power, for wealth, for favor. But Elara had called him from necessity and desperation, and that honesty was something rare, something he could not ignore. One evening, as twilight thickened into the palace halls, Elara sat by the window holding Kael as he slept. The moonlight touched her face, revealing the strain of sleepless nights and worry. Kael'ren appeared behind her, silent as a shadow, and for the first time he did not speak. He simply observed her. You fear me, he said finally, voice low, almost a murmur. Elara turned slightly, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. She admitted.
But I also
I feel something else too, something I can't name. Kaelren's gaze softened, though the edge of authority remained. That is not weakness, he said. It is awareness. You sense the power around you, the danger, and yet you remain. That is courage, and courage is rarer than loyalty or strength. Her heart fluttered, though she tried to keep her composure. The tension between them was growing, a delicate balance of fear, admiration, and unspoken longing. Then from the shadows of the palace a faint movement caught her eye, a reflection in the mirror that did not match her own. Kaelren noticed it too, his expression tightening slightly. "The palace watches," he said, voice sharper now, "and it does not always like visitors." The mirrors reflected more than images. They carried whispers, glimpses of the unseen, hints of dangers that had not yet come. She realized that the bargain she had accepted was only the beginning. The palace, Kaelren, and her own hidden powers were converging in ways she could not yet comprehend. Her pulse quickened as Kaelren stepped closer, and she felt the weight of destiny pressing down upon her. "Elara," he said softly, "you are not merely here to survive. You are here to change what cannot be changed. But the question remains, are you ready to face what you are becoming?" Elara looked at him, holding Kael tightly. Her fear was strong, but so was the spark of determination that had carried her this far.
I don't know, she whispered, but I will try.
"For him, for my son." Kaelren's eyes softened, yet the shadows in them hinted at trials to come. "Then we begin," he said, turning toward the hallways that led deeper into the palace, into secrets, lessons, and dangers she had yet to imagine. As they walked, the mirrors seemed to ripple, reflecting not only their present, but glimpses of battles, curses, and choices that lay ahead. Elara realized that her life had changed irrevocably. The bargain was made. The cost was yet unknown. The bargain. And in the depths of her heart, she sensed that the greatest trial had yet to arrive. The palace of Kaelren was alive in ways Elara had only begun to understand. Every hall, every mirror, every whispering shadow seemed to have memory, will, and intent.
At first, she had thought it merely protective, ensuring her safety.
But now she realized the walls themselves were watching, testing, nudging her toward truths she was not yet ready to face. Kael, her small son, slept in a chamber bathed in pale moonlight. The golden life essence had kept him strong and healthy. Yet each day she noticed subtle changes in herself. Ripples of warmth, a faint pull in her chest when danger loomed, and glimpses of magic that seemed to respond to her emotions. Kaelren appeared quietly behind her, as he often did, observing rather than intruding. His presence was a mixture of authority and something softer, a tether she could not yet name. "You have felt it," he said, voice low and measured. "The curse your family carries is stirring." She had sensed it for days. Small shadows at the edges of her vision, whispers in the mirrors that seemed to call her name, and a strange pull toward the palace's darkest corners. I do," she admitted, "but I don't know what it wants, or why it chooses me now." Kaelren's amber eyes softened slightly. The curse feeds on despair, weakness, and fear. But it also reacts to hope, courage, and the bond between blood and spirit. You are its key, whether you know it or not.
Elara's chest tightened.
To be a key to something so dark frightened her, yet the thought that her courage might change fate brought a strange spark of hope. She glanced down at Kael, whose small hand had unconsciously reached out toward her chest. A faint warmth pulsed from him, and Elara realized that her child might hold part of the answer, part of the power that could awaken or quell the curse. "You must learn to control it," Kaelren continued. "Not for me, not for the palace, but for yourself, and for him. If you falter, the shadows will rise." Days passed as Kaelren guided her through lessons both subtle and profound. He showed her the mirror's secrets, how to read their reflections of truth and danger. He led her through the palace gardens, where flowers glowed in darkness and water flowed against gravity, teaching her to sense the flow of magic in the world. He never touched her, but the proximity of his presence was a constant reminder that power could be both protective and suffocating. One evening, a shadow moved unnaturally in the hall. Ilara had been practicing a minor spell to illuminate the hidden corners of her chamber when the mirrors reflected a dark, twisting figure. It was a form she did not recognize, an echo of the curse itself, reaching into the palace. Kaelrin arrived instantly, his eyes narrowing. "It is stronger than usual," he said, voice tense. "The curse senses your growing strength. It fears what you are becoming." Ilara felt a surge of fear and resolve. "What do I do?" she asked, clutching Kael tightly. Kaelrin's gaze softened as he studied her. "You do what you have always done. You fight. You protect. And you trust yourself." The shadow moved closer, flickering in and out of the mirrors, whispering words that made the walls themselves shiver. Ilara stepped forward, unsure of the magic coursing through her veins, but determined to act. She focused on the warmth in her chest, the bond with her son, and the life she would protect at all costs. A soft golden light pulsed from her hands. The shadow recoiled, writhing against the glow. Kaelren's eyes widened slightly, approval hidden beneath his calm exterior. "You are stronger than you realize," he said, voice barely audible over the whispering shadows. "But do not mistake this as control. It is only the beginning." The shadow hissed, a sound like wind through broken glass, and then vanished into the mirrors. Ilara felt the pulse of magic recede, leaving her trembling but alive. Kaelren approached slowly, studying her. "You saved him," he said softly, indicating Kael. "And in doing so, you have saved yourself as well. But the curse is patient. It will return." Ilara nodded, breathing heavily. "I don't know if I am ready," she admitted. Kaelren knelt slightly, meeting her gaze. "Readiness is a choice, not a gift. You have already begun. Now, you must continue, or the shadows will not wait for you to be prepared." The following days brought new challenges. Ilara discovered that the palace itself held trials, corridors that twisted and changed, gardens that whispered secrets, and mirrors that reflected fears she had buried for years. Each test forced her to confront not only the curse but her own doubts and guilt. She saw visions of her husband, of the life they had once shared, and the son who had become her only anchor. She felt rage, sorrow, and longing mixed with determination. And always, Kaelren observed, guiding her subtly, challenging her without overt interference. The tension between them grew. She resented the control he wielded over her environment, yet she could not deny the way his presence steadied her when shadows pressed close. His glances lingered too long, and though he remained distant, she sensed that he was as affected by their connection as she was. One evening, the palace trembled with a deep, resonant hum. The mirrors flickered with silver light, and the shadows lengthened unnaturally. Ilara's pulse quickened. Kael, asleep in his cradle, stirred as if sensing the disturbance. Kaelren appeared beside her, moving faster than thought itself. "It has sensed you fully now," he said, voice urgent. "The curse is awake. And it knows that you are no longer afraid." The shadows surged from the corners of the room, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human, almost alive. Ilara felt a pull in her chest, a connection she could not fully control. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she steadied herself, focusing on Kael, on her desire to protect him, and on the warmth that had begun to grow between her and Kaelren. A figure emerged from the shadows, a dark sorcerer, drawn by the pulse of her growing power and the life essence within her child. His eyes gleamed with malice. "The Alpha has claimed you, little mother," he hissed. "But you belong to the shadows now." Ilara's breath caught. Kaelren stepped in front of her, a wall of power and authority, amber eyes burning like twin suns. The sorcerer raised his hands, summoning darkness that coiled and hissed. Kaelren's voice rang out, commanding and unyielding. "You will harm none within these walls." His power surged outward, throwing the shadows back, yet the sorcerer's presence was strong. Elara felt the strange warmth pulse from within, stronger than before. The bond with Kaelren, and with her own courage fueled a magic she had never fully understood. She raised her hands instinctively, directing the light of her resolve toward the dark figure. The shadow shrieked, recoiling at the power she wielded. Kaelren's gaze met hers, a mixture of pride and warning. Do not let fear control you. Control the fear. Use it as a guide, not a chain. Elara focused, channeling every ounce of determination into the golden light. The sorcerer hissed, the shadows writhing violently, and then, with a final surge, vanished into the mirrors, leaving only silence and the faint scent of smoke. She sank to her knees, trembling but alive. Kael crawled into her arms, cooing softly. Kaelren approached, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes betrayed something rare, acknowledgement, almost admiration. "You have done well," he said, voice low, "but this is only the beginning." The curse is patient, and the world beyond these walls grows more dangerous each day. You have awakened more than your power tonight. You have awakened a tension that will not easily forget you. Elara looked at him, heart racing, mind still reeling. She felt a strange mix of fear, awe, and longing. She had faced the curse, faced the shadows, and yet something deeper, something unspoken, was stirring between her and Kaelren. He stepped closer, voice softer, almost intimate. "Elara, do not mistake what has occurred tonight. You have power, yes, but you are not alone. And I am not who I once was." "You are changing that too." Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to ask what he meant, but the words failed her. Instead, she held Kael tighter, feeling the pulse of life and magic intertwine around them. The palace seemed to settle around them, as if acknowledging her victory. Yet the mirrors flickered, hinting that more trials awaited. Shadows whispered from corners unseen, and the faint hum of the curse lingered in the air. Kaelren's amber eyes met hers, searching, questioning, and in that gaze, she saw not just power, but a hint of vulnerability. A man burdened by his past, yet drawn to the courage of a mother who had summoned him by accident and by fate. "You have seen it," he said softly, his hand brushing close to hers, though not touching. "The curse is alive, and it knows your heart. It will come again, stronger, more cunning, and next time, it may not show mercy." Elara nodded, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down upon her. She was no longer the desperate mother pleading for help. She was a participant in a story far larger than herself, one that involved magic, shadows, and a man who was both terrifying and irresistible. As she gazed into the flickering mirrors, she realized the truth. The palace, Kaelren, and her own growing powers were now inextricably linked. The bond forged in desperation, fear, and courage would carry them through the trials to come or shatter everything they held dear. And from the deepest shadows of the palace a whisper rose, soft but deliberate. "She has awakened, and so has the world that waits beyond these walls." The palace of Kaelren was alive in ways both beautiful and terrible. Shadows moved like living creatures, whispering secrets of the past and omens of the future. The mirrors reflected more than images. They reflected choices, regrets, and the invisible threads that bound the world together. Elara stood in the heart of the palace, holding Kael tightly in her arms. Her hands trembled, not from fear alone, but from the surge of power within her. The curse that had haunted her family for generations now pressed against the walls of the fortress, stronger than she had ever felt before. Kaelren appeared beside her, his cloak flowing like liquid night. His amber eyes were sharper than ever, reflecting both determination and worry. "It has sensed us fully now," he said. "Ah, the curse will not relent. Every shadow in this palace, every spirit bound here, will rise." "You must be ready." Elara nodded, though her heart raced. She had grown stronger, yes, but the magnitude of what awaited her terrified her. She had faced shadows before, had learned to call upon her own magic, and had survived tests of courage and fear. Yet she knew instinctively that the final trial would demand more than strength. It would demand trust, sacrifice, and a courage deeper than she had ever imagined. The shadows in the hallways began to stir, twisting into grotesque shapes, forms that reflected her deepest fears. She saw the face of her husband, lost and distant. She saw the night her village had fallen to disease and despair. She saw Kale, his life fragile, slipping through her fingers. Kalen's voice broke through her thoughts. Focus on him. Focus on what you protect, not what you fear. Fear gives the curse power. Love gives you power over it. Elara closed her eyes, drawing on the warmth she felt for her son, the bond they shared, and the trust she had begun to form with Kaelrin. Golden light pulsed from her chest, radiating outward. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, twisting violently as if resisting a force they could not understand. A dark figure emerged from the deepest corner of the hall, a creature made entirely of black smoke and malice. Its eyes glimmered with hunger, and its voice was like grinding stone. You cannot escape me, child of the cursed bloodline. You and your protector cannot withstand me. Kaelrin stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the creature. I am not merely a protector, he said, voice ringing with authority. I am a force you cannot reckon with. The creature lunged, swirling around them in a storm of shadows. Elara felt fear claw at her chest, but she resisted. The golden light within her flared stronger, strengthened by her love for Kale and the bond forming between her and Kaelrin. Together, Kaelrin commanded, his hand hovering near hers. We face this as one. Fear is not ours to hold. Trust is our weapon. Elara's heart swelled. She reached toward him, and their hands met, not fully touching but connected by the magic that pulsed through the room. The shadows shrieked, recoiling at the combined force. Kaelrin's power, long tempered by solitude and regret, surged in tandem with hers. He had lived in darkness, feared by his own people, haunted by past failures. But Elara's presence, her courage, and the innocence of Kale reminded him of what he had lost and what he could still save. The creature roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the palace.
Elara focused all her energy on the golden light within her.
It expanded, flowing outward like a river of warmth and power, reaching into every corner of the hall, filling the mirrors, the gardens, the very stones of the fortress. Kaelrin's voice joined hers in a chant older than memory, older than the walls themselves. It was a call to life, to protection, to hope. The shadows writhed, clawing at the edges of reality, and then, slowly, began to dissipate, drawn back into the mirrors from which they had come. The dark creature let out a final echoing shriek before vanishing entirely. The air stilled, heavy with the scent of magic and the faint tang of smoke. The mirrors shimmered once, then reflected only the room as it truly was, a chamber of peace, a sanctuary strengthened by courage and unity. Elara sank to her knees, breathing heavily. Kale stirred in her arms, cooing softly, unaware of the battle that had just taken place. Kaelrin approached, his cloak settling around him like a protective shadow. You did it, he said softly. Not just the shadows, but the curse itself. It has been weakened, perhaps even broken. Elara looked at him, eyes wide, still trembling. We did it together, she whispered. Kaelin studied her, amber eyes softened by relief, and something deeper, something unspoken. Yes. Together, he said, and for a moment the barrier of authority, distance, and fear between them softened, revealing the man beneath the alpha, the man who had longed for connection, who had feared vulnerability, yet had found it in the courage of a mother protecting her child. Days passed, and the palace settled into a calm that felt almost unreal. Elara walked through the gardens, marveling at the flowers that glowed softly in the twilight, the streams of silver water that flowed as if by magic, and the mirrors that now reflected peace rather than shadows. Kale played at her feet, laughter bubbling like music, filling the halls with a joy that had been absent for far too long. Caelren moved among them, his presence constant yet unobtrusive. He taught Ilara to strengthen her magic further, to understand its connection to love, courage, and life itself. Their bond deepened, not through words alone, but through trust, shared experience, and the quiet acknowledgement of the battles they had faced together. One evening, as the twilight deepened into a velvety darkness, Caelren stood beside Ilara at the balcony, watching the village below. The moonlight shimmered on his hair, and his amber eyes reflected the stars. "You have changed," he said softly. "The woman who summoned me out of desperation, she is gone. You are stronger, wiser, and far braver than you know." Ilara smiled faintly, warmth and awe mixing in her chest. "And you have changed too," she said. "You have let someone into your life, into your heart. And it seems that even you are not immune to trust, to hope, or to love." Caelren's lips curved into a rare, soft smile. "Perhaps," he admitted, "or perhaps I am only learning what it means to be human again. You have reminded me, Ilara, that even those who live in shadows need light." She reached for his hand, and this time he did not hesitate. Their fingers touched, the warmth of connection stronger than any spell, any magic, any force. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, the palace still, the twilight gentle, and their hearts aligned in understanding and unspoken promise. But the peace was tempered with awareness. Though the curse had been weakened, its remnants lingered in the edges of the world. Shadows might rise again. The unknown beyond the palace walls might bring danger, and the trials of the future would require vigilance and courage. Caelren spoke, voice low but steady. "The darkness is gone, but the heart remembers. We must remain vigilant, not because we fear, but because we are capable of protecting what is precious." Ilara nodded, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. "Then we face it together," she whispered. Caelren looked down at her, a mixture of pride and something softer, almost reverent. "Together," he agreed. That night, as Cael slept peacefully in his cradle, Ilara felt the warmth of life and love around her. The palace, once a fortress of shadows and fear, now seemed to breathe with hope, its walls pulsing with the magic of redemption. For the first time in years, Ilara allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by desperation or curses, but by the bond she shared with her son and the Alpha Lord who had entered her life by chance and remained by choice. The palace was no longer merely a place of trial. It had become a home, a sanctuary, and a crucible for transformation. Shadows lingered, yes, but they were no longer threats. They were reminders of what had been overcome and what could be faced together. Caelren's hand rested gently on hers, a silent promise. "The world beyond these walls will always test us," he said. "But here, now, we have found strength in each other." "That is a power greater than any curse, any shadow, any darkness."
Ilara looked at him, and for the first time she felt fully unafraid.
The trials, the curses, the shadows, they had shaped her, yes, but they had not broken her. She had discovered courage, power, and a connection that transcended fear. Cael stirred in her arms, stretching tiny hands toward the light of the room. Ilara smiled, feeling hope rise within her chest. The Alpha Lord who had once been feared by all now stood beside her, not as a tyrant but as a partner, a protector, and perhaps something even deeper, someone who had learned that redemption was possible, even for those who had walked in shadows too long. The palace was quiet, the mirrors reflecting peace, the gardens glowing softly, and the night sky above filled with stars. Ilara knew the path ahead would not be without challenge, but she also knew that together they could face anything. And in that moment the world felt balanced. Shadows and light, power and vulnerability, fear and love, all held together by courage, trust, and the bond of those who had survived the darkness. For the first time in a long while, Ilara allowed herself to breathe. The curse had been confronted, the shadows had been overcome, and a new story had begun. A story of hope, transformation, and love that could endure even the deepest night.